Let's get an update on the situation in Gaza. Bring in Unicef's Toby, who's joining us from Jordan, I believe. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to have your time tonight. So we're hearing that hospitals now, almost all hospitals in Gaza, are basically out of operation, and it appears that the situation is going from bad to worse, really.
Yeah, I mean, the situation is dire. I mean, we're at a stage, as we just heard, where premature babies are struggling to survive. There's no power, there's no water, there's very little fuel available to provide to the medical facilities. And it's horrific. Day in, day out, it's got worse and worse. And that's why we keep pushing for this humanitarian ceasefire. But also then to be able to provide better life-saving aid to children, to civilians who need it immediately. The hospital situation is really critical. Child healthcare services for more than 1 million children across the Gaza Strip are on the brink of collapse. And this is not only massively concerning during peacetime, but when there's a crisis on, it's even worse when you have the scale of injuries that hospitals are having to deal with, and then also other cases, everyday health issues. So it's really a catastrophic situation right now.
And when you talk about the well-being of children in Gaza, you've got babies, newborns, premature babies, basically, out of incubators because there's simply not enough fuel or electricity to keep the equipment in the hospital running. You've got schools shut in Gaza, a shortage of food also reported in some areas, not enough shelter to go around. It sounds like a living hell for the children of Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, it is a living hell for the children of Gaza, and that's why we need it to stop now. That's why we need a humanitarian ceasefire immediately. And at the same time, we need all parties to better protect children, to better protect civilians while these intense hostilities continue. This is a very densely populated area. You now have 1.5 million people and 750,000 children of that 1.5 who are living in shelters, who've been displaced, living in shelters mainly in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And the conditions there are getting worse as well by the day in terms of access to sanitation, in terms of safe water. We are bringing some life-saving aid in, and when it comes in, we're distributing as quickly as we can to shelters, but it needs to go to wherever the needs are most. And it continues to be incredibly dangerous. We've had 100 UN staff members killed. Which is the most in such a short period of time in any conflict. And we've had Unicef staff members lose family members as well. So the operating environment is, of course, extremely dangerous and complicated.
You say that the situation in Gaza is complicated, it's dangerous. In an interview last night with CNN, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he does not see why the patients can't be evacuated from hospitals such as Al-Shifa. What would be the greatest complication with a mission of that nature?
Well, I mean, if you think of evacuating a hospital at any time is incredibly difficult. And you think of evacuating a hospital with newborns, with other injured children, adults, at a time of intense hostilities, then it becomes even more difficult. And that's why we're calling for this immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We're calling for the supplies to get to the hospitals that need it. And that means fuel, that means also medical supplies to bolster at least some of the resources there. It means ensuring they have safe access to water, ensuring oxygen lines are working. And that's really the solution right now.
And I was telling you about the interviews given by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to American networks over the weekend. In another, he claimed that there was an offer made by the Israeli government to get fuel to the hospital, but that it was basically turned down by the Palestinian armed group Hamas. For aid organizations such as yourself, where do you go to in instances where fuel is desperately needed, medical supplies are also in desperate need, and how are they then channeled to make sure they reach those most in need?
Yeah, so I mean, UNICEF and UN agencies have been using fuel reserves, any fuel that has been inside the Gaza Strip already, to move it around to places where it's most needed. And that includes, of course, hospitals. It includes also water desalination plants to provide safe water. UNICEF runs one of those plants that is still running at sort of minimal capacity. But we are getting to a critical point now where the fuel reserves are running extremely low, and that's why we keep calling up to be able to scale up that amount of life-saving aid to get inside the Gaza Strip. And the conditions, we need those conditions to be met. 43 trucks are coming in a day roughly on average, but that's nowhere near enough given the immense needs. And let's not forget, the complications. We also still have Israeli children who are abducted inside the Gaza Strip who need to be released immediately and have safe, unconditional terms. So there's multiple issues at play, but the first thing really is a humanitarian ceasefire and to bring in much more life-saving aid to save lives.
And who bears responsibility for the suffering of the children caught up in the violence from October 7th, be it the Israeli children who are among the hostages, as you were just telling us, and the children in Gaza who now have to be taken out of incubators, who may very well die because of the seriousness of the situation, and those whose homes have been razed to rubble?
Yeah, I mean, Unicef, we're a humanitarian agency, and we're working to do whatever we can to better protect children, civilians, wherever we can. And that includes working with all sides to the conflict, talking to who we need to at a global level, regional level, country level as well, to do whatever we can to improve the situation for children and to bring in more life-saving aid, and that's absolutely critical. But ultimately, the parties to the conflict are the ones who are responsible for what's going on now. But we'll keep working with everyone we can do to get a ceasefire, to get life-saving aid across the Gaza Strip, not just to the shelters, which is critical as well, but across the Gaza Strip, and then work to at least somehow bring back some normality in the lives of children, both those inside the Gaza Strip, but also Israeli children who have been so badly affected as well.
And just lastly then, if this violence, I mean, it's continued, this war, especially the Israeli war on Gaza, which has intensified, over 11,000 people dead. These are Palestinians, over 1,200 dead in Israel from the attacks on October 7th. About 200 or so, more than 200 in fact, hostages are believed to be held by Hamas in Gaza. Should more bombs fall on Gaza, will there be anything left of the Strip at this stage?
No, I mean, the devastation is massive. It's horrific. I mean, it's, like I said, it's already a very densely populated area. It's a small geographical area. You have more than 1.5 million people now, nearly 1.6, displaced in this very small area. You have people whose homes have been devastated. They're now in shelters. Schools are being used as shelters. Hospital grounds are being used as shelters. But nowhere is safe. There's nowhere safe in the Gaza Strip right now for any child, for any civilian.
Just lastly, Toby, there is also the problem around hospitals in Gaza, such as Al-Shifa, that not only are they having to resort to maybe the most extreme measures to try and keep patients alive, but you've got the thousands of people who are taking shelter on the hospital premises. They're being told to move to safer parts of Gaza. The level of safety there is questionable, we're told. But how much of a complication is that adding to the ability of the hospitals to function optimally? And if those people move, what awaits them where they're told to go?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Being displaced inside the Gaza Strip, where do you go? You leave your homes, you go south. Shelters are already totally overcrowded. The conditions are horrific. And there are few places to go. I mean, leaving your home anywhere is a last resort. And that's why it's so tragic to see this happening. And people then are moving, like you said, to hospital grounds, to schools, to UN schools, UNRWA schools, where they believe they will be safe and where they should be safe, but are not.
Toby Fricker, good to speak to you, UNICEF spokesperson, speaking to us from Amman, Jordan tonight. Thank you for your time, sir.